All right, good evening, everyone. We will go ahead and get started tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could ask everyone to please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Mrs. Ramirez, you have the roll call. All right, and we will turn it over to Mrs. Piazza for your superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good evening. Just for a piece of information, we are going to switch athletics with academics, so the students who are here to be recognized, you certainly are always welcome to stay, but you also can leave after your recognition if you need to get home and get to some other things. So hard to believe that we've been trying to get this meeting in for about 2-3 weeks now, and some weather has prevented that, so thank you for coming out. And for those of you who follow our board meetings, we will be here for 3 weeks in a row with standing committee board meeting and standing committee to get back on track. Today, I am going to ask you to join me in a moment of silence. It's been quite unfortunate. We've had a loss of quite a number of our family members over the course of this year, and tonight is certainly no exception. There are two people that I would like to recognize tonight and ask you to send your thoughts their way. Mr. Bill Gibson. Mr. Bill Gibbons passed away on January 4th. He spent 36 years here in our district as an educational consultant with the IU as well, and a year at the district as an employee liaison, and served in the U.S. Army also. So, as well as the Vietnam War, I apologize. So I certainly want to extend our thoughts and prayers to his family. And we are, certainly sorry for their loss. The other person that I want to acknowledge and have a thought in your prayers are the Bobko family who lost their son recently, and certainly, something horrific to have to go through. And so our prayers and thoughts go out to both of those families. And as a school board, we did acknowledge them as well. So we take a moment of silence for those two families. Thank you. I apologize for fumbling through that. Couple of shout outs and couple of pieces of information tonight. Profile of a graduate, we are in January, and those topics are creative and critical thinkers. And so as our teachers are working with our students and our community is acknowledging our students, that is a topic that they are trying to address, and giving opportunities to kids to show their power of thought through creativity and critical work. A few weeks back, Mr. Reichel had the opportunity to meet with a group of individuals. I think their name is the Ridge Girls. And if you don't mind technology, switching slides. This is a group of women who actually live in the Paxenosa Ridge area, who started to consider the needs of the community and young girls in general. And their work is around considering the needs of young women as they go through their maturation period, and what do they need in terms of supplies, support, and so on and so forth. And so this organization came together and presented to Mr. Reichel about the opportunity to work with students and provide the students the materials that they may need when they're going through their menstrual cycle, both through donation and support as needed. They do have an organization that they've put together. And certainly Patricia Schwartzman is their leader, and if you're interested, their contact information will be forthcoming to be part of the work that they're doing in helping young ladies go through that change, and not be embarrassed by it, and also have the supplies and know how to ask for the supplies that they may need to deal with those situations. So certainly a great cause. I will say that we've also had a young lady last year who's still in the middle of that work, as a middle school student who took that cause on her own to raise funds and raise donations, so students could have a little bit of dignity as they're trying to manage that as a young teenager. So we thank Craig for having those meetings, and certainly organizations like this who recognize that that's a challenging time for young girls. And a couple of shout outs. Some are slightly past due, but nonetheless important. We have a number of people who have either earned or renewed their national board certification. So Kathy Calamino recently earned her national board certification. That is a pretty grueling and arduous task to do so. Karen Cerulli went through the renewal process, as did Kelly Cuck. And so we want to congratulate them on that work. We know that it certainly is not easy, and there's a lot of time commitment that is put forth for that. And so we're very proud of them for putting that effort out, on behalf of themselves and certainly on behalf of the district and their students. Also, a little past due, but January 9th was our Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and so just a quick shout out to all of our community and state law enforcement, but certainly here within our district, our police officers and security agents as well. So we thank them for all of their hard work and continued efforts. And with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Piazza. So as mentioned, we will move to athletics, so I will turn it over to Mr. Whitman and Dr. Baltz for our fall athletics presentation.
Yeah, athletic, we had met earlier, later in the month of December, I believe. Dr. Baltz, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, I'm just going to slide over here so I can greet and congratulate our students a little more easily. So just going to go through a quick overview of some of the highlights of our 2023 fall season. So we'll jump right in. Early in the fall, we released and posted the Interscholastic Athletics Disclosure Act report from the 22-23 school year. You can see over that past school year, our booster clubs, athletic booster clubs within the district donated in excess of $175,000 towards our athletic programs, which was a significant increase from the previous year. So we're very grateful for the assistance that all those booster clubs provide our student athletes throughout the district each year. This year, we're continuing to be a significant part of the East Penn Conference Student Athlete Character Council. This year's representatives from Easton are seniors Ben Finelli, Evilise Cole, and Jocelyn Morgan, and then juniors Cale DeSora, Maggie Scalzo, and Carson Hippert. They meet monthly with representatives from each of the 18 schools in the conference as leaders within their school to work on a variety of different topics, anything from relations with the referees and how those interactions take place through mental health, nutrition, college planning, all sorts of good leadership tools and experiences for those students. The reason most of the crowd is here tonight is we're honoring our fall scholar athletes from our Easton Area High School sports. You'll notice here we have 9 student athletes being honored. Before I get into the individual student athletes, I just want to point out that each of our student athletes were incredibly competitive within the league. So of the 18 schools, you can see that we have 3 student athletes there listed as the overall winners. That put us in the category of having the most overall scholar athletes in the conference for the fall. So our student athletes are not only succeeding in their athletic endeavors, but also very much so in the classroom. And I can tell you that we had quite a few more that were very close to being the scholar athletes for their sports. So we're very proud of all of these individuals. So I'm going to call them up one at a time to honor them. Each of our scholar athletes will receive a certificate that is signed by myself, Mrs. Sayago, Mr. Geiger, Mr. Cuck, Ms. Piazza, that recognizes their accomplishment. They also receive a medal from the league that recognizes them as a scholar athlete, and the stars on the ribbon represent each of the 18 schools in the league. So first up, from girls soccer, our scholar athlete this fall is Jillian Lapis. From boys soccer, we have Jacob Borluca. From field hockey, Jocelyn Morgan. And you'll hear Jocelyn's name a few more times during this presentation. From girls volleyball, Olivia Keckler. From golf, James Geiger. From boys cross country, James Viglianti.
Thank you.
From girls cross country, Sarah Olagino. Congratulations. From football, we have Colin Torres. And lastly, from girls tennis, we have Suhani Makwana. Congratulations. And each of our overall scholar athletes will be part of a banquet that this year will be held at the end of the school year for the entire year's worth of overall scholar athletes from the conference. So the students, as well as their parents and their coaches, will be invited and get the details on that when they are solidified in May. So congratulations again to all our scholar athletes. And here you can see, as we honored with some graphics on our social media earlier on in the fall when this was announced, Jocelyn, Olivia, and Suhani and their honors as the overall scholar athletes for their sport this past fall. Our FCA group continues to meet weekly. Dr. Corey Kuncio continues to lead that group with 20-plus students. He reported to me that we have had some meetings where there are in excess of 30 to 40 students in the morning, and Whitson's has jumped in to be a wonderful partner with that group as well in feeding the students when they get there at 6:45 in the morning with a nutritious breakfast every Thursday morning. I'm going to highlight just a handful of the community service things that have gone on with our athletes up to this point this year. So we've continued to be partners with the I Can Bike program, which teaches some special needs young people how to ride a bike on their own in the course of the summer. We do this throughout 1 week where they start out learning to ride a bike in the gym with some assistance, and by the end of the week, they're out in the parking lot riding bikes all on their own. So we continued that partnership this past summer and have already committed to continuing the partnership again in the summer of 2024. And you can see just a couple pictures here of the kind of beginning to end, so to speak. In addition, the baseball team has continued their tradition of providing Christmas trees and decorations to families within our community during the holiday season. This year, they were able to provide those items to 49 different families in the Easton Area School District, as well as a gift card to ShopRite for groceries for a holiday meal. And in the following slides, you'll see a few pictures of the night that they go around and present those items to the different families. A number of our other teams were involved in quite a few different volunteer and community service items throughout last summer and the fall season. As you can see, everything from bunny trail events to assisting at youth practices, running summer camps, being involved in the Reading Under the Lights event, trunk or treat. Cross country was involved in a breast cancer awareness fundraiser, and girls volleyball also had a significant fundraiser for pediatric cancer research this past fall. As we moved towards the winter and just before the holiday season, the boys wrestling team decided that they were going to do a toy drive, put a box out at a number of different wrestling matches, and in the end, they were able to provide toys to 280 different children through just this simple fundraiser. Give a lot of credit to them. This was the brainchild of one of our wrestlers himself who came up with the idea and kind of ran with it. From there, we got a lot of feedback from the other winter teams where they would like to be involved next year and make it a department-wide drive and just have these boxes at our basketball games, swim meets, et cetera. So extremely successful in its first year and looking to do much more in the future. As far as participation goes, the next several slides are just going to break down the overall numbers of student athletes that were participating in each sport and at each level. As you go through, just to give a quick synopsis of the totality, I think we were down in participants by about a dozen student athletes in the fall. Not necessarily a significant number when you break it across, 15 to 20 different teams, but a little bit of a dip, which isn't uncommon compared to what we're seeing across other schools in the area, but certainly something to keep an eye on moving forward to see if those trends continue. As we move forward to the next slide, you see just kind of a quick synopsis of some of the results from the fall season. A lot of success across our different teams. Obviously, our cross-country program had an extremely successful fall with an undefeated regular season for the boys team, a 17-1 regular season for the girls team, excellent finishes throughout the league, district, and state tournament. And as you'll see in some of the coming slides, they celebrated the 500th victory for Coach Bobby Joe Powell during the season as well. Our varsity field hockey team continued to be one of the strongest field hockey programs in the area, and that success continued throughout their program. As we move through football, they're continuing to take some steps forward and improve upon where we had been. Golf, although the record doesn't show in the dual meet the success they had, we looked at the aggregate of their scores from the beginning of the season to the end, and as a team, there was a significant amount of improvement in the overall scores for those kids during their season. So the biggest thing there was definitely personal improvement throughout the season. Boys soccer, I don't think I've ever seen so many ties in my life, but this year that played to our benefit as the season came down to the wire and we were able to qualify for the District 11 playoffs and capped off their season then with an extremely exciting win over Phillipsburg at Lafayette's brand new soccer complex this past fall. Girls soccer continues to be one of our steady, high-achieving programs as well, continuing to make it deep into both EPC and District 11 playoffs. Our girls tennis team had an outstanding season, including some individual medalists throughout both the EPC and district tournament under the leadership of Coach Joe Rossi. And our girls volleyball program had one of their most successful seasons in at least a decade with their qualifying for district playoffs as well. So a lot of success there. The overall winning percentage was down a little bit from the previous year, but we're still winning overall throughout all our programs 64% of our contests. So up in the upper left-hand corner, Gino, I think if you click on that, there should be a little video graphic that pops up for Coach Powell. Yeah, maybe not. All right, we'll just go back anyway. Just some quick highlights from the cross-country season. You can see some photos there from their early season victories over Phillipsburg and some of the highlights of their season, both the District 11 and EPC meet, as well as Coach Powell being greeted by some of the runners during the meet where she achieved the 500th victory as our coach. The season saw us garner quite a few all-conference honors across our different sports. You can see them all listed out there with each of the individuals that achieved all-conference this past fall. We were fortunate enough to have quite a few all-state honorees as well. So from field hockey, we had 4 all-state athletes this fall, 2 first-teamers in Jocelyn Morgan and Lexi Causa, 2 second-team honorees with Reagan Day and Aubrey Kraser. We had all-state honors also for Kendall Pop in girls soccer and Olivia Keckler in girls volleyball. So an excellent fall for us when it came to honors across the state for our athletes as well. This technically is the winter season, but since it happened the first week of December, I thought it was a little more timely to celebrate this now. Our cheerleading team won the East Penn Conference Championship in our gym in early December. They will be heading to the state championship this Friday and Saturday in Hershey to compete for a PIAA state championship in cheerleading. It's just a quick reminder of our PIAA eligibility that we check each week, and then again at the end of the semester. And the next slide is going to provide a breakdown of the number of student athletes who were ruled ineligible by school each week throughout the season. I think the important thing to note there is that number of, I believe it's 46, is significantly lower than where we were last fall. I believe we're 20 fewer students were deemed ineligible during this past fall season than the year before. So I think some of the interventions that we are providing, and they're listed on the next slide, meeting with the athletic office every time they're ineligible. They have those discussions with myself and with Mr. Hess in regards to creating a plan to make sure that it doesn't happen again. What are the steps to take? What do you need to do? Meet with your teachers, be a little more diligent on completing your work, things like that. Based on the numbers we saw this fall, seems to be working. Certainly have more work to do, but making a positive impact there. Thank you to Mr. Cuck and to Rochelle DeArmas for helping me learn how to run these reports moving forward. Hopefully I'll be able to provide a lot more detail on these too in the future. And we're looking to maybe provide some awards for the teams that we have with the highest overall GPAs. But just a quick synopsis of the data that we had from last school year, which showed us that the GPA amongst our student athletes at Easton High School is significantly higher than the general student body. So we hope that holding those kids to those higher standards of academic eligibility are making an impact, and the discipline and traits that they're learning, work ethic through athletics is carrying over into the classroom as well. And then just a couple notes on sports medicine contracts and things that we're doing along with St. Luke's. We're continuing to provide physicals both at Easton High School and throughout Coca-Cola Park in the summer. Our winter physicals, by charging $20 a piece, collected $1,740. You see a quick breakdown of how many student athletes are being treated on a daily basis for injuries and evaluations by our trainers. We reinstituted in-person concussion management testing, which had gone by the wayside and went to more of a virtual do-it-on-your-own platform during the COVID pandemic. At this point, though, we are back doing this in person and have also offered a secondary test, which is the BEST test. It's a balance test that can be done either in addition to or in replacement of the online impact test for concussion management. We were lucky enough to have a number of interns this past fall as well. We had 4 interns in the fall, and we're really excited that Hunter Steidinger, whose name is up there, he has returned to do an additional internship with us in the spring. He loved his experience here, and we're excited to have him back for the spring as well. Overall, St. Luke's continues to be a wonderful partner for us on the athletic side. We have 3 trainers that are provided through St. Luke's: Omar Masvayas, Julia Labasso, who was recently promoted within St. Luke's to the position of the lead for St. Luke's here with the Easton School District, and Zach Lang, who is an Easton alumnus who joined us this past summer as part of our team through St. Luke's. They continue to provide us with team doctors and weekly visits with their physical therapists and doctors to evaluate our student athletes. And this past fall, we had a new fellow that roamed the sidelines with us and did the visits at the school during the week. That's Dr. Tran. Was really excited. Dr. Tran was so into his role as being our team doctor that he went out and bought his own sideline ultrasound equipment so that he could do his own testing on the sideline, which was really cool to see. And he was very proud of the fact that we were the only ones that had that. So All in all, this past fall, we only had 16 insurance claims completed through Bollinger for injuries sustained with athletics. And we continue to have St. Luke's as a partner in addition with strength and conditioning, providing us with James Farley, our strength and conditioning coach, and then partnering with us in the recently completed weight room project. We've already begun collecting the commitment letters and information from our student athletes who are planning on continuing their academic and athletic careers at the collegiate level. We will be holding a ceremonial collegiate signing in the spring, similar to what we did last year, where we'll honor all of those student athletes, everything from community college to junior college, NAIA Division 1, 2, and 3 student athletes in the spring. Revenue to date, these are both a little up from where we were last year at this point. They do include December, whereas I think last year's report had not had the numbers from December yet. But in reviewing that, I think one of the cool things to see is we have already brought in a significant amount of revenue from our live streaming platform. So excited about what that has done to this point and where it can go moving forward. So that was one of the drivers of the increase in special event revenue. And this could be updated to include the winter after last week, but after the fall season, we finished 7-1 in the Service Electric Challenge Series with our rivals from across the river. So far in the fall and the winter, we have added an additional win there, so we are 8-3 overall at this point right now. We've got 2 more contests for the winter. Next Friday night, we've got boys and girls swimming and diving taking on Phillipsburg. We need to get to 11 to ensure that the trophy stays in Pennsylvania. It still has yet to cross the Delaware River, and hopefully it never will. So that's where we're at this point. And right now we're halfway through what's been a very successful and exciting winter season, and looking forward to the next several weeks and seeing what all of our teams can achieve, both in their fields of competition and in the classrooms as we finish out the winter. Anybody have any questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Waltz.
And now would be the time for any member of the public that would like to speak about any athletic department agenda items. Seeing none, I think we can proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Whitman. Yeah.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to congratulate our student athletes. We're very proud of you, and I know your families are as well, so keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, look who's got there.
Really cleared them out, I'll tell
That
you.
really cleared out, man. I mean,
What'd you say, Kyle?
really
Who's
cleared out.
left?
You got Alloy 5 on the right.
I know,
I
right,
was like,
just
they could
Alloy
come out.
5. They're still trying to hide back there. All right, Ms. Robertson, we will turn it over to you for academics, educational technology, and student supports.
Earlier this month, we had a really good meeting in regards to the topics below, so I'll send it over to Dr. Draper.
Thank you, Mrs. Robinson. Good evening, everyone. Just like to provide an update about our Eastern Area School District Comprehensive Plan. The Pennsylvania Department of Education requires all school districts to review their district comprehensive plan every 3 years. So we are currently developing this plan for the 2024 to 2027 school years. We're engaged in a strategic planning process where we're looking at all aspects of our district and determining how we will move the district forward in continuous school improvement and in strengthening and developing systems and protocols that support student achievement and central office administration, principal, and teacher leadership. As a part of the process, we engaged over 25 stakeholders from various facets of our school community to review our mission statement, student achievement, discipline and attendance data, and to analyze how well our district is doing at executing practices within 5 main areas of the Conditions for Learning Needs Assessment. Those 5 main areas are empowering leadership for district continuous improvement, focusing on continuous improvement of instruction, providing student-centered supports so that all students are ready to learn, implementing data-driven human capital strategies, and organizing and allocating resources and services strategically and equitably. Our team would like to give a special thank you to the Eastern Area School Board members, administrators, teachers, parents, and community partners for coming out 3 evenings to provide feedback and input about our practices and for completing the online survey. We value your voice and partnership in ensuring our students and districts succeed. Our C&I team is now using the feedback we received, and we are developing goals and action steps for our district. A preliminary plan will be available on our district website for public review next month, and a more formal update of the plan will be provided to the board prior to the submission to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Next, I will turn this over to Mr. Reichel, who's going to share 4 items that we have up for approval, for board approval.
So good evening, everyone. The first thing that we have on the agenda tonight to discuss is the Navigate 360 PBIS add-on. In August of last year, I offered the opportunity for all of our elementary schools and the middle school to participate in a PBIS reward system that was electronic. Some of our schools did it previously, but I wanted to afford the opportunity K-8 to be able to do it. Not everyone jumped on board right away, but I would like to say that through good press within our schools and our principals talking, they realized the add-on and the benefits that they can have with this system. Currently this year, we're really piloting it with the idea that to look at the cost effectiveness of this program versus other ones for next school year. But I really wanted to have the opportunity for all of our students to participate and have this reward system that is electronic focused, so it's less, if you've ever worked in a school that gives out tickets for positive behavior, they end up being all over the floor, kids lose them, unfortunately kids steal them. So this gives an opportunity to be able to do it electronically and kind of gauge what's occurring, and then also look at the behavior. So what are we rewarding across the school, who's giving the positive rewards, who isn't giving them, and we can have conversation with those adults too to kind of enhance and be able to solidify that. The second one is Caron Foundation, MOU. We had Caron Foundation previously at the middle school. We might even have had them at the high school a couple of years ago. I'm not really familiar with that or not. We're looking at utilizing the Caron Foundation as a subset of all the other counseling services that we currently offer. At the middle school last year, we used it as a alternative to suspension program for some of our students, where they would actually access those services if they got caught vaping. As an educational piece, we're looking at some of the same components at the high school, but obviously expanding it based upon our needs that we're currently seeing. We have a lot of providers at both buildings that offer a lot of different opportunities. Unfortunately, if you're familiar with the article that came out over the weekend in the Express Times, we have to identify that there is a concern and we have to address it. And adding another tool to our toolbox is extremely important at this time. Professional service agreement, this is just for one individual to be able to do complete our school psych evals, bilingual school psych. So this would just give us another opportunity. I do want to say that the Caron Foundation, there is no cost to the school district. Professional service agreement, there's only a cost if we utilize that individual services. And the last one is our mitigation plan. It is the same mitigation plan that we've been using probably for about 1.5 years now. ESSERS just requires that every 6 months that we have it on board approval, and then we update it and then put it on for the agenda. Is there any questions about any of those?
Yeah, we saw, we got some questions on the Caron Foundation. And yeah, I did Google them. I guess they are, not quite sure how this works, but they are part of Altria, which used to be Philip Morris. I really don't know. So this is like an anti-vaping awareness type program that,
So
I still say Philip Morris, but it.
yeah,
I know
so
what you
Caron,
mean.
my understanding is that Caron Foundation obviously is a drug and alcohol treatment organization. They are partly funded by the Lehigh, or Northampton County Drug and Alcohol Task Force. That's how they're paying for this program, along with the, I forget how you say it, the organization that you mentioned.
Right, the corporate,
Correct.
like a
So-
corporate,
So that corporation
whatever.
put aside money to be able to fund some of these type of organizations, the community-based organizations. That reference that you made to that organization funds a lot of different things. This is just one piece of what they do. They also help fund Big Brothers Big Sisters and organizations like that. So it's really a community-based organization, but yes, it is an organization that has been founded by Philip Morris.
okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members on the academics items? All right, and we don't have anyone from the public. Good? You're good? Okay. All right, that's it then. We will move on to budget and finance. Mr. Snyder.
Yes, thank you. Budget and Finance met about 2 weeks ago for a few items here. I will defer to Mr. Balzerson for a quick overview. There are some items here that will require a vote at the next business meeting, and Hans will give us a quick overview.
Yes, thanks, Brian. We do have some action items that are going to be needed at the board meeting. The first two are participation in the Northampton Monroe Pike County Joint Purchase Board bid. That's run by the Colonial Intermediate Unit. And the paper and janitorial supply bid. And you can see there that the copy paper is the only one where there's going to be an increase in quantities over the previous year. We're adding 500 cases of paper. And we're going to look for cardstock paper, paper towels, and toilet tissue as well in that bid. And so we're going to need some action at the board meeting on that item. Next item. Looking for participation in the fuel oil bid. These products are the same as the 23-24 bid. Biodiesel, 130,000 gallons for the buses, and unleaded octane, 25,000 gallons. That's for the maintenance vehicles, et cetera. Due to the timing of the award of this fuel bid, we're going to need to have approval at the board meeting to accept the bid as well, because the timing of the IU board meeting where that award is made falls between our board meetings. So preemptively, we're going to ask for acceptance of that award by the IU board. And the nature of these two bids and why we piggyback on the IU Joint Purchase Board is that it combines the majority of all the school districts in our region. So it gives you a better bang for your buck, piggybacking on all the other quantities from all the other school districts in the IU. Item C is the natural gas contract. My assistant Wendy did a great job working through this and doing a lot of the legwork. Our current contract with UGI Services ends on June 30 of this year. So we started to look at pricing to lock in and see if we could reduce our costs for the natural gas for July 1 of 2024, when that current lock price of $5.40 per decatherm expires. So that's what we started to do. And we started looking, we went through a third-party vendor. Tradition Energy, and we were able to get a price from them on a 2-year lock of $4.02 per decatherm. And then we started looking at directly with UGI Energy directly and cutting out Tradition Energy. And we were able to find lock-in pricing for $3.30 per decatherm. So currently, the annual spend is 46,595 decatherms. So the current price that we have at $5.40, the annual spend is about $251,000. Had we stuck with and went with UGI Energies, the annual spend would have been $187,000, would have been a savings of approximately $64,000. But going and dealing directly with UGI Energy, the annual spend is now projected to be $153,000, or an annual savings of $97,000 on the natural gas. And again, I just want to thank Wendy for all the legwork she did on this, and she did a great job of saving the district a boatload of money here. I think there's a second slide. Yes, due to the, I'll take these bullets in kind of reverse order. Due to the volatility of the natural gas market, we needed to, I needed to kind of ratify the customer service confirmation agreement to lock the pricing. Any delays would have potentially cost the district more money. So at the board meeting, we're going to be asking to ratify the customer confirmation agreement that I pretty much already signed, and saved, we just went through the savings. So we didn't want to jeopardize any savings, so I went and signed that customer agreement. The fourth item is just informational. It's just a grant that is going to be available to school districts and school entities in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It creates $100 million of available funds to be managed by Commonwealth financing agreement. They're for capital projects, building projects, et cetera. There is a 25% match that's required, that the school district would have to match the award, that if we get an award for this project. However, if the project is deemed an emergency, then that 25% match is waived by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The awards will range from $500,000 to $5 million. There's no limit to the number of applications that a school can submit. However, there's a caveat that no one school district can receive more than 20% of the overall allocation. And the last bullet, I have yet to see any additional information from the CFA in regards to this project. So we're keeping our eyes open. So we're going to hopefully, once we get information from them, we're going to start the process of jumping on this and getting our hands into that pot of money if we can. Questions?
I have a question. On that grant, do we have a grant writer, like if somebody, well, that's gonna be a very competitive grant. Every district is on the radar with that. Do we have a grant writer that's watching for the release from PDE, or is that coming right out of the business office, being rented?
Well, we talked about it a little at Cabinet, and we do have a person in the federal projects office that's going to be kind of spearheading it, but it's going to be a combined effort. It's going to be myself, it's going to be Josh, it's going to be Dr. Piazza, and we're all going to kind of work on that together.
Good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board regarding budget and finance? All right, any public comment on public and finance? It appears there's no public. Okay, so coming up next week at our voting meeting, we will have those 3 action items that the board will be voting on, and that concludes the budget and finance.
All right, thank you. And then on a related note, buildings and grounds, I'll turn that over to Susan to get us started.
Yes, I'll turn the matter over to Dr. Swiatek.
Thank you, Mrs. Hart-Eppinger. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, we have 4 items on the agenda for review. 3 of those items will be, we're recommending from the B&G Committee to take forward for approval at the board meeting. Those 3 items will be the last items that we discussed. The very first thing that we have this evening is that we've asked Mr. Mather from Dewey to come and present on some of our updates from capital projects, to give us some information to our new board members who have joined us, and just to get a general understanding of where we are and where we're looking to be, and then we'll follow up with the conversation after that, then Andrew.
So, hello, everyone. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be back. Happy New Year. Hope everybody had some good quality time with their families. So I have a presentation here to just highlight a number of projects that were completed through the district, talk about what we have planned for this summer, and then looking ahead to the future. So the very first thing that I'd like to highlight is the successful completion of Palmer Elementary School. As you guys are well aware, we've gone through many of the buildings and done large scale projects, and I think the district should be very proud of all of those. This one especially was a challenge that we all worked through. Just due to COVID, material shortages, it was tricky, and it obviously came down to the wire. Last time I was here presenting was right as it opened up. But I just want to say it was a true team effort amongst you guys, especially Ken Case and his staff, the design team, and the contractors. Everybody worked together, worked through the issues, and got us open on that very first day of school. So we went out, we got some really nice shots of the building outside and inside that I just want to share in case anybody has not gotten a chance to walk around. I just want to highlight, the quality of this building. So from the outside, you see the front, you see the great view in the back. It really came out very nice. On the next slide, just a better close-up of, the front of the building, the main entrance. Right there is the cafeteria, those 3 sets of double doors. And then, through that, we'll just, walk through some of the photos inside the building. Top left, we have the main lobby with that fireplace, not non-working, but the school staff put a nice little fire in there to just brighten it up. So just a very inviting space when students walk in. The gym came out great, looks beautiful. Lower left is the library, and then a typical classroom on the lower right. And then, as you guys are well aware from all the projects that have happened, once the building opened, we're still not done. There's still some things that we have to fine tune. So with that, the winter kind of puts us on pause for the completion of some of that site work in the back of the building with our irrigation system. So the contractor was out as recently as 2 weeks ago to work on some of the final stabilization back there. Once the weather warms up, we will be commissioning the irrigation system. We continue to address any punch list and warranty items that are brought to our attention, and most notably, just commissioning the HVAC system. Again, with the delays to the power at the building, we really did not have time to test anything beforehand. So it's a work in progress. We're working through heating right now, and I'm sure when we come back in the spring that there's going to be some cooling items that we have to address as well. But for the most part, things are running very well, and I think a lot of the staff are very happy and pleased with the project. So not only did we accomplish and move into a brand new building, We also did some work throughout the rest of the district over at the high school. Again, another thank you to Ken Case. There was an issue with receiving the whiteboards for the classroom projector project, so Ken and his crew were able to have temporary whiteboard or projection screens hung for the first few weeks of school so that there was no disruption to the education. And then in early October, we did receive the material, and the contractor worked over the weekend and some overtime to hang or install those new whiteboards. So we're still waiting on 2 that have been on back order. Unfortunately, I do not have an update at this time of when they will be shipped, but as soon as we do get them, we will have them installed. But every classroom that was part of this project does have at least, the full or partial whiteboard to project on. So that one, while tricky, was still successful. Over at Shawnee Elementary School, we replaced one of the boilers there this fall, so that work has been completed, and we actually have on the agenda a credit change order for unused project allowance, so saving a little bit of money on that job. And the trickiest one that I think was kind of a real different project for us was the filtration upgrades at the pool. We had a few presentations on that, but I am proud to say that, through some good work with the contractor, we were able to get all of the work completed ahead of the swimming season. Originally, we had, been worried with material lead times that we would have to phase this as just a piping replacement and then after the season come back and do equipment replacement. But we were able to get everything completed on time in one phase ahead of swim. So that was very nice to see. And just on the next slide, or just a couple pictures, you could see some of the before, like what we were dealing with in that space. Just some piping that was in bad shape, creating somewhat of an unsafe environment. But after we were done with the project, a very clean area for the school to use. And the pool now has really good turnover in terms of their water filtration, so there are no concerns on that end. So looking ahead, we are continuing to review and update the capital plan across the entire district for all the buildings. And so this summer, we are looking at a few projects which are, on the agenda for approval at next week's meeting. 2 of those contracts, which are Omnia cooperative purchasing agreements, are at Shawnee Elementary School for the replacement of 3 rooftop HVAC units and and controls upgrades for those HVAC systems. So Trane and Siemens both provided us proposals that are being recommended for approval. Additionally, over at the middle school, we have state contracting pricing to refurbish the existing equipment there. We have seen some concerns with the structure and the piping in there, so the scope includes a sandblasting and coating of the interior surfaces of that cooling tower to protect it from any further damage, including some rust and bacteria growth. We'll be replacing the fill and intake louvers, which will help increase efficiency on the equipment, replacing a header and distribution piping, and we had a faulty control panel out there, which will also be replaced. And then, as we look forward, even past next summer, again, we are reviewing that capital plan, with the administration and talking about all the facility needs across the district. One that we are working on right now is a partial replacement of the middle school roof. The roof is over the original building section, which is currently out of warranty and should be considered for some replacement. So that's a project that we are currently looking to budget for and potentially be going out, summer of '25 at this point. And, as we look through that capital improvement plan, a lot of the items are relating to the high school. So we just want to make sure that we continue to look at the short-term needs as well as any long-term discussions or planning for that building. All right. So are there any questions on, any of the projects that, had concluded or are in the works for this summer?
I have a couple questions, maybe just one. The continuing plan with the high school.
Yeah.
So the last I remember seeing publicly was presented was 4 options for a new high school. Obviously, we know the shape it's in. Does that continuing plan mean to get back to looking at the high school and design and concepts and major either renovations or additions and new buildings? And I don't know if that goes to you or to Josh, but it's been a year since that was presented, and then I didn't hear or see anything. So I just wanted to know if that continuing, because there's the short term, obviously, that we have to address, because, I've said this at the B&G meeting, if we start tomorrow picking this back up, we're not putting a hole in the ground for at least 4 years, maybe more. And then the increasing prices, the costs, everything's going to go up. So I just wanted to ask the board and the committee, the administration, if we are going to pick that back up and start, or keep visiting that was started a year ago.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm happy to answer that question, and a couple others too. So to kind of recircle back, first off, thanks, Andrew, for presenting the update. Appreciate it. To the board and the community, Andrew did make mention regarding the capital improvement plan. Those projects that we have discussed for this summer are on the agenda for this evening to discuss after this conversation, and that we'll be bringing to the board for approval at next week's board meeting. There are 2 projects. One will be funded by state and ESSER money, and the other recommendation is to take from capital reserve. And why I bring that up is because as the B&G board committee meets on a monthly basis and our capital improvement team meets on every other week basis to discuss these projects and the plan itself, we've had an opportunity to talk at length in the B&G committee regarding the high school project and regarding capital projects moving forward. So we're currently recommending for this summer, but then that leads, where do we move beyond, 2025, 6, and, and beyond for 5 to 7 years. So when we vetted this through the B&G committee, the B&G committee feels strongly that the district re-engage in the high school construction process conversation. So I want to make sure I relay that because that is the recommendation from the B&G committee. But I do want to take a moment to kind of explain a little bit of background and why that's important to have this conversation. So as we start to look at our capital projects and budgeting out and which projects we prioritize, this conversation has a profound effect on how we budget and how we prioritize. So as you heard Mr. Simonetta mention about putting the shovel in the ground and being out 4 years or 5 to 7, depending on which mode we would go, that forces the B&G committee and the administration to figure out how to budget. So should we budget long term? Should we budget for 3 years to take care of capital projects? Should we budget for 5? If the board says, hey, administration, go forward with a new high school, go forward with renovation, if that occurs next year or 2 years from now, that puts our budgeting back for capital projects for 7 years, right? Because we have to estimate that this project's taking 5 years minimum. So based on when we receive feedback from the board on which direction the board recommends that we go, that's going to be important for us as a B&G committee to budget accordingly, finance with Hans, next couple months, and then how far in advance do we go? So I do want to relay that to the board because that's really important information for us to have in the short term and long term. So short term, we certainly have to go through the capital improvement plan, and we will do that and address any needs within the next 3 to 5 years that the high school absolutely needs to have done structurally, foundationally, safety, all those really critical components. When we presented to the board it was last April, if I recall correctly, we had the conversation about the capital improvement plan itself addresses the structural pieces, the things that we have to address for safety, for security, for foundation. What it does not address are the needs of the administration, the students, the teachers, the building itself. It doesn't talk about the programs, doesn't talk about the aesthetics, the overcrowding, the parking, the traffic flow. It doesn't address any of those needs. So when we look at the capital improvement plan and we say, well, there's $25 or $35 million that we need to spend over the next 3 years to fix those, massive issues, that's just the structural issues. And I shouldn't say structural. That's just the major issues that we need to address. It doesn't address the rest. So when we looked at those conceptual ideas, the numbers did come in around $225, $250 million. That was a year and a half ago. So those numbers, I'm sure, are going to climb by the time we decide on whichever route we want to move. So that's kind of some background in regard to why the B&G committee is recommending that we re-engage in these conversations, and then ultimately, once we hear from the board of the whole on which direction we should be moving, or some guidance from the board, we will then be able to plan accordingly with our curriculum instruction team, with our B&G team, with our finance team, so that we can address all those needs in the appropriate fashion. So that was a lot. I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Susan, Mike, Joey, so.
Susan, yeah, but that's great. I mean, I'm happy to hear that. But I think all that, like, the board can't make a decision on which way to go until we put the financing in place, or at least the plan for financing, how long it's going to take to get there, and then, just start talking about what we saw on the capital improvement plan, those priority items. Some of those things we may not have to spend in the next 3 to 5 years if we're going to do a new school or an addition or complete renovation. But to your point, we do need to reengage, I think. My recommendation, and the Building and Ground Committee, I think, to the board, let the administration reengage, get back into the design, into the conceptual design of the high school building, which we know is in dire need, and bring reports to you guys monthly, and just keep you updated on where we're at. And I think the financing is first and foremost. I know we had the Raymond James, the finance consultants. They can provide all kinds of scenarios, and Hans knows that very well, all kinds of scenarios, what we need to do financially to get to, whether it's 200 million, whether it's 150 million. They can do all kinds of projections. So I think all that has to, play at the same time.
Yeah, and last April, I think we did bring just some rough numbers regarding the financing pieces, just rough though, and they've changed for sure. From the administration's perspective, I won't speak for all of us, but I'll speak for myself. I think we see 3 options. I think we see option 1 is not doing anything whatsoever and just addressing the basic needs. Option 2 is, do we renovate, and how do we renovate, and what's that cost, and what's that process? And number 3 is a new school. So I'm not sure there's more, than those 3 options. And then I think it's fair to say that when we had the presentation, it was pretty clear that the numbers came in pretty close, very, I'll say within a couple, $10 million maybe, and it may be more expensive to renovate than build a new high school. So I think it's all those things to consider, but ultimately, we recommend from the whole entire B&G committee that the administration re-engage in this process to start that process again. So I want to make sure I captured the essence of our conversation accurately. So I want to, extend the opportunity to make any comments, Susan, Mike, Jody, Dion, anybody from our team as well.
Well, my opinion is the renovation side of it still doesn't answer our issues with classroom sizes, widths of stairwells, widths of walkways, hallways, and such. So, I'm thinking that maybe that is not the route that we need to go, but I think we need to take a look at those numbers again to refresh ourselves as to what they are, and absolutely look at that list of things that really need to be addressed right away and get them, and figure out how we're gonna pay for that too, at the same time.
So I just have a question. Is there a alternative site anywhere for a new high school, or are we locked in 25th Street there to fix up that building?
Yeah, so Brian asked that question actually a few months ago. We've discussed it internally. I don't see anything readily available. To be fair, we've talked about a couple other options. I have not reached out to one specific, to see if there's anything else. So right now, we do not believe that there is, but that's as of tonight, Bill.
So I guess my thing is definitely going back to one of the main concerns, and that is the financing and funding of it. So we have an idea basically of a range if we're going to build new. So to me, again, that is the question coming from, what would it take for us to bond it? Should we be bonding it now so that when we're looking at it in the next couple of years, we're not, as Mike said, which is why we're in the situation we're in with the pool, because we went down this road. So that would be something that I would definitely want to see, is the financing part of it. The other part to it is, and I said this last time when it was brought up about moving it, I'd like to again caution, when we talk about moving it, we do have, and I hate to say this, sometimes if you've ever gone across the Glendon Bridge, we have students who do walk from our south side area over to the high school. So if we're moving it, just saying is, I hope we're very aware of our students and their needs.
I think we had this discussion before. I think that the city of Easton's pretty landlocked. If I recall, we've had spoken about that, so certainly, I don't know. I guess it's something to think about.
I mean, the experts can tell us, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would think there's a lot more cost in, if you're building on a site we already have, there's a lot more land development and stuff you're gonna need and cost to move it as well. Jody, to your point with the financing, and then I should have brought that up, very good point. Start budgeting now, start looking at a number, and start adding money to that debt account, even though we're not spending it, to build up that line account, so like we did in the past, we can be fully funded, or of course, $200 million is different than $100 million, but we could get, as far as we can, start building up that budget line item now, even though we don't have all that debt, you can take that additional annual surplus, transfer that into the capital reserve, and then use that money to either lessen the bond that we have to borrow, or use that money for some of those other projects in the other schools. So there is a strategy, and again, this is all should, I think, in our recommendation, is to start being discussed now and present that plan sooner rather than later to the board, so you can make an informed decision on where we go.
So I see a big problem, we have 3,000 kids, what are we gonna do with them while we renovate the high school?
Yeah, so one of the options, Bill, and just to make sure we're on the same page, there was a renovation option that would certainly require tiering, maybe relocating, absolutely. The other option that we discussed was a brand-new building, and at the conceptual idea presentation, and again, it doesn't have to be this way, but what was presented was building that building down a different section of that property, building it brand new, and then once that building was created, shifting the entire building over there and then demoing the current building. Now, at that meeting, to be fair, there were questions regarding, I'm not sure we like that location, don't know if that's the best option, but that was what the discussion was there. So there are different ideas there and different possibilities.
Well, I'm gonna throw this at it because that's an idea I had a while ago, is that, we have the middle school right now. And in September, I think about 700 kids left the middle school and went to the brand new school in Palmer Township. Okay, so now we have some space for some kids. What about moving 9th grade over to the middle school campus? I think there's more, it's not a one-for-one trade, but get those kids out of the high school over to the middle schools, get them settled in, and then we can move the 2,000 or so students into half of the building the other half. You know, just an option. Because, you know, I was around when we didn't have ninth grade at the high school, and it was very nice.
For the high school.
high school.
Very nice for the high school.
Yes. Very nice for the, you know, 10th, 11th,
Yeah,
12th grade.
well,
Because,
not for the middle
ninth
school.
grade was at Shawnee, they were the
Be a
kings of the
cold
Smith,
day
and
before
they
I do that.
proved themselves, and they were, you know, they were the top class. Now they get to the high school, and now they're like the little brothers that just ran crazy, because I was a ninth grade principal for 3 straight years. And, that very daunting task, because, like I said, they ran wild, it seems like, at the high school. But we have a chance to, because I mentioned before that the movement of the ninth grade to the high school was not anything based in data. It was just based on money. And, you know, maybe it's not too late to look at that. And I don't really know if didn't see anybody that thought ninth grade should belong in the secondary with 10th, 11th, and 12th. So it's something to think about.
Well, that's a different topic. I'm going to wholly disagree with everything Bill just said, but what I want to move towards here is the building itself. I think one of the reasons why it's 9 months later after that presentation is because of a lack of consensus about direction. And I think now that we have a newly seated board again, what we need to do is give we cannot have 3 options anymore. That it needs to be a decision about which of those paths are we taking? Because once we make that decision, there's going to be lots of disagreement about how that one decision should be implemented. And everybody's going to be unhappy about something throughout that process. So we can't let all of those other things that are potential problems prevent us from getting to the point where we just at least conceptually decide, well, are we doing nothing? Are we renovating? Are we building new? So I feel like we need, whether it's a recommendation from B&G or just we're done talking about it, now we need a resolution from the board to direct us which way to go. That needs to happen so that we cannot have, you know, this multifaceted conversation about all the different possibilities. That was 9 months ago and more, and we need to move forward.
So I'm going to move you forward.
Excellent.
As Josh stated, there are 3 options on the table, which is maintain and keep the building safe and adequate for our students, renovate, or rebuild. The administration's recommendation is that we rebuild a new high school on the site that we're at, being creative in how we do that, Bill, with whatever that creativity looks like. I do think that we need to go back to our architect and talk about what our vision academically is. While every opportunity he presented us was beautiful and there was some discussion around the space on that plot of land, I do think that's still something we have to be creative about to match our needs. But the building itself also needs to have some conversation and consideration about building the high school that not only meets our needs today, but will meet our needs to the future. We're building a building for theoretically 100+ years. And public education should not look like what it looks like today in 100 years from now, let alone today. There's a lot of work and innovation that needs to happen, and our building needs to reflect that. And so having full trust in the teams that we have, I know that we can come up with a design that meets everybody's needs from building structure as well as from an academic purview. And then the big conversation around that is around the financing, and that is, certainly not a light conversation, whether you're talking about $250 million or $350 million. The fact of the matter is we're not going to do it all on bonds, and there will be an impact to our taxpayers, and I agree wholeheartedly with Mike that that's a conversation that the board has to have very seriously and start planning for, immediately upon making that decision or agreeing with my recommendation and the team's recommendation. As a taxpayer here in the Easton School District, nobody wants to see their taxes go up. But the reality is that we also have to consider all those possibilities and start building those pots of money so it's not one grand hit on year 4 or year 5 saying now we're raising your taxes exponentially when perhaps we should be considering that incrementally. And then obviously the bond and borrowing issue is our major work to do. And so if that helps move the board's thought process forward, that is our recommendation from the district.
I would like to see the board essentially adopt a resolution that says that that's the path that we're taking. There's a lot of other components that are going to have to come into that, but if we can at least get a record of how many of the 9 have decided that that's the path that we want to take. I feel like that's the first step. There's going to be a lot of disagreement about how we're going to pay for it, what it's going to look like, what, all of those things. But until we know how many people we have committed to the idea, we can't really move forward.
Has the board made it, well, Tracy, your recommendation for a new school, has the board been given information to make an informed decision whether renovation, new, or a combination of both?
Yes.
Like, was that all vetted out?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
When
part
all
of the
the
April
information- okay.
presentation.
So then, with all that, the recommendation is to build new, so.
Yeah, that was part of the April presentation. It was also an opportunity for any board member who wanted to take a tour of the building and look as it stands now, what areas, if we were doing an infrastructure renovation, would be able to remain in its current state versus what would be a gut, basically a gut job and a rebuild and rejigging of spaces to make that appropriate for the educational setting that we have now. So that was vetted out with the board. And then the other thing that we have talked about internally as an executive team, as I talk about what the building looks like, is having that conversation around the future of education, knowing that some kids will be coming part of their day hybrid or all of their day hybrid. And do you have to build the school for 3,000, can't speak today, I apologize, with 3,000 seats in it? Or is there more of an ebb and flow? And that does not mean that the building is perhaps any smaller or any less expensive. It means that the spaces are used differently. And so those are all the conversations that we've certainly started to have and have been having. But we have to have them with our architect, and we need some, guidance from the board as well. So to answer your question, long-windedly, yes, and now there's all these other finite details to pay attention to.
So you guys are the dream team right now, and I'm sure you guys, you've come across the issue or the concern that we have about, okay, if we're going to rebuild, what do we do with the students in the meantime? So I think what I would ask the BNG team to do is have that a part of your meeting to, see what other districts have done, come up with suggestions. And as a part of the finance team, I'm sure we can also add to our agenda to, discuss or figure out the ways what financing would look like.
So one of the things I'd like to see, and this is probably a question, is more of, we've, since the time I've been on the board, we've put a lot of money into different parts of the high school. And I'd be curious to know how much money we've spent in improvements and different things, the roofs, the chillers, the HVAC, the addition, those types of things that we've put into that high school, and compare it to where we would be if at this point we would be building new. Because obviously, as you see, several years back, we renovated majority of our elementary schools, our middle school, and those types of things, and now you're starting to see some of those general maintenance things starting to come back. And so I just want to make sure that we are continuing to fund and maintain what we did as renovations, and also what we're going to be looking to do as far as this would be. But it's just a general question of, in the last 5 to 10 years, what we spent on the high school alone. Look at the pool. Just one example.
And Julie, it's a good point too, just to kind of reground everybody, that pool, those upgrades that we did to fix the issue, we are estimating at about 5 years that's why we did it. So, if the board would say, tomorrow, administration, this is the route we're going, and we're 5 years out at best, and that's what we projected the pool to last with the new filtration. So just want to kind of share that because it does affect our budgeting process in a lot of ways.
I mean, looking at it now, I see no other choice other than to rebuild. But last time I was hung up on, I think the location is terrible. I don't know if there's a way to be any more creative with the limited space we have there, but we really are tied down to that location, for better or for worse. you know, I know it's gonna cost, and Mr. Simonetta brings up some good points, you know, and if we're not gonna start digging or whatever for at least 3 to 4 or 5 years, you know, that's, what's it gonna add? I mean, 33% of the cost, you know, something like that, you know, for fixed costs and variables that are gonna come into play. You know, if you're looking for a commitment from me either way, my inclination is 50%, 50.1%. Really, let's start looking at replacing it, even if it's not ideal. And Ms. Piazza, you know, she just gave me a horrifying thought when she said, you know, this is looking at something that, this might be a project that's supposed to last for a century. You know, if this building is going to stand for a century or be used for a high school or any kind of education for a century, I'm like, boy, that's quite a commitment to be stuck into. It's going to outlive all of us here, most likely. But our names might be on the plaque forever. So they'll remember it either way. But I think if it were to just be a yes or no question as to replace, I don't see doing nothing as an option. So I have it as between the renovate or rebuild. I would have to say, for practicality's sake, we really should pursue that option. So that's where I stand on my 2 cents as far as what,
So can we-
concurring with the administration's
Yeah,
recommendation.
Can we do
yes.
that? Can we vote soon on a resolution that basically says, this is, you know, the will of the board is to pursue this particular avenue? I think that would be helpful for everyone to be clear about what it is we intend, and for the public to understand where we are too, so that we can do all of the planning. It's not to say we're gonna, you know, start a new building next year, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so I will look to,
Put that on the table for next week, or is that too
Yeah.
soon?
no, let's get it done. We gotta move this along.
And Brian, to put you in perspective, when I said 100 years, March School's over 100 years old, right? So
Yes, yes.
we have that in our own district, as do
And
many
it's
other.
it's the nicest looking elementary school.
And PACS as a structure is not, it's pretty close.
Almost
We have
close, yeah.
Two century-old buildings that are doing quite well.
Yep.
So, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, good point.
Heston was over 50 years old.
Yeah.
All right, well, we appreciate that conversation and your commitment to make a vote next week.
Yep, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, everyone. We have no one in the audience,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, yeah, so we still have 3 other items
Oh,
to go
sorry,
through in
I
regard.
Sorry, I thought we were done.
So Susan, yeah, so we started with that because we wanted to have that capital projects conversation. There are 3 items here. You know, Mr. Case will certainly share the first 2, and then the third one is what Andrew already mentioned in regard to a credit change order, which is positive news that we'll have on for approval at next week's meeting. With that being said, Ken, if you don't mind.
That's quite all right. I appreciate all the comments and feedback earlier. I'll quickly go through these. As Andrew already mentioned, all of the items listed there. For the Shawnee, this is an ESSER-funded project. It's through Omnia Cooperative Purchasing. 2 contracts that Andrew mentioned, one through Trane, one through Siemens, to replace 3 rooftop units at Shawnee Elementary. And then that's for Trane's contract. And Siemens' contract would be to provide new controls for those 3 units, as well as 9 other rooftop units in that building. It would also upgrade 3 panels that communicate with our district-wide HVAC system. This will offer us a number of new abilities and points that we can monitor and check, and greatly improve the HVAC system there at Shawnee Elementary. The second item is at the middle school. It's the cooling tower that was also mentioned earlier. The cooling tower is original to the building. This is a complete basic renovation, tear down, and rebuild of that tower through the actual manufacturer that supplied that piece of equipment. It is a CoStarz contract. It would come out of cap reserve. They estimate that this refurbishment to the tower should get us approximately 8 to 10 years of life out of that unit. So we believe that is the best direction and course to move to maintain the cooling system within the middle school campus. And the last item there is also for Shawnee Elementary. It's the project where we replaced the second boiler at Shawnee this past summer. Pleased to report that this is a credit change order. It's one of the good change orders to see. As you can see listed there, the credit amount. So it is a contract change, so it has to be approved by way of change order. Any questions?
Here's where we start.
So I don't know if you guys will have the answer to this, but like, what is our usual warranty on like the chillers? And I know we had hired somebody a while ago to get the learning to maintain them and stuff, and does that extend the warranty with us continually, obviously doing the maintaining?
So it depends on the piece of equipment. I believe the warranties that are listed here, they're typically 1-year manufacturer warranties, and then as well as a warranty for install. I mean, that's typical. There's some pieces of equipment that have extended warranties on them, but typically they're just a 1-year warranty, unless you would specify that and have some type of agreed upon amount, but it would be an additional cost. We do have service contracts for the equipment that we have in district through Trane and also through Siemens. So they do the service, routine maintenance on them, which obviously, we would hope would extend the life. Also with Siemens, with their service contract, we do have a tech that comes in once a month that aids in problem areas within the district on controls or issues that we might have throughout the course of that month. So, that also helps in maintenance of the equipment and, the long-term, repairs, reduce of costs. So, but typically to answer your question, it's just 1 year, yeah.
What is the life expectancy of a cooling tower?
That's a great question. When we had the manufacturer's rep out, we're getting close to that number. I think 20 years, 15 years on rooftop pieces of equipment. I mean, you're really entering that end of life, especially because that equipment sits out all year round. It's out in the elements. The cooling tower, there's water that is used in that process of cooling the building, and you get rust, you get mold, there's bacteria, and we do all that testing and preventative maintenance either in-house or with contractors. So we try and stay on top of that, but they are out in the elements. So typically, when you get around that 15-year mark, if you go 20 years on a piece of HVAC equipment, I think the district's getting their money's worth. Any other questions? Thank you.
Since we have no one in the audience, thank you.
And if I may, just real quick, Ms. Sayago, just go off script a little bit. I just want to make sure that we all welcome Dr. Catherine Schultz to our board meeting, because this is your first official board meeting since your hire, so didn't want to lose sight of that either, so welcome.
All right, thank you. Moving on to policy, Mr. Snyder.
Yes, thank you. And just for the record, item 8C is going to be pulled from the discussion for night. There's going to be some more internal discussion on that, and we meet as a committee again in 2 weeks, so that is the target to have that back on for board discussion and public comment. Our policy subcommittee met about 2 weeks ago, so Mrs. DeFore, I will defer to her for the overview on 003.1 and 012.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Snyder. So we do have 2 policies up for their first reading this evening, the first being 003.1. A revision that we made was the number of readings that our policies have before they are adopted, amended, or repealed. So we, of course, have 3 readings in all, the 3rd reading being when they are typically approved. So we added that language in there, and then we also added the fact that if at any time we have to truncate that procedure and have something adopted more quickly, we could, of course, the board could, by majority vote, move forward with that. So that's the change to that policy. The second policy that we have on there, the revision for 012, has to do with our board committees. We previously had, or we currently have, 7 board committees. We were looking at combining buildings and grounds with safety and security. So when you take a look at that document there, you'll see that those two have been combined. If you scroll down toward the bottom of that policy, you'll also see that we combined what both of those committees did oversee into just the one combined committee. So those are the two major changes that we have in those two policies. Any questions?
Yep. Questions and comments. So I guess my question comes to on 003, and I've said this in previous meetings. This is very similar to what we had as far as policy 009, which everyone kept saying was retired, and if you search through, it is not retired. It's basically the same of reading of the policies. It was last approved October 27th of 2015 was the final reading and approval. So as far as I can tell, I haven't seen anything that says that that policy has been retired. So it's very similar, but it also states in that policy for what you're trying to cover here. So if we're going to do that, we need to either, I would prefer to take some of the language that's in that policy and put it in 003. I think it's a little bit more clear. And we either need to retire it or take the language out of 003.
Jody, where do you have a copy of 009?
009
Is it 009? I want to make sure I have the correct
Yep,
number.
009. It
Where-
is, if you go into board docs and you search policies and check policy 009.
Okay, so it's not listed
No, it is
numerically?
not.
Okay.
No, and I had asked about that before. Because we weren't doing, first we were doing readings, then we weren't doing readings, and different things were occurring, and
Okay, well, I just want to say that is, I don't know what happened to 009, but the fact that we're discussing it is essentially my fault because we had this conversation about, how many times we approve a policy or read a policy, and Tracy had said that it was 3, and I went and looked at, number is that we're currently discussing?
003.
003, it didn't say that. There was nothing listed for 009, so there was no way to know that that was an existing policy. So I'm not sure how it got dropped from board docs.
So I was gonna ask Jonathan, what is the procedure, because it's not on board docs, 009 anymore, but it was approved and I don't.
Right, how would anyone know?
Right,
I mean,
right. Jody said that there's nothing, no board action. Do you need a board action to dissolve a policy?
To retire, yeah, you would. Now, when I'm looking at it, it says that it was retired October 27, 2015. If you look at that date, it doesn't, what's on the agenda for October 27th doesn't look like a retirement, but I'm currently trying to pull up the meeting minutes, which would have been past the next regular meeting, to see what actually occurred. To see why there's that, misunderstanding as to whether it was retired or whether that was just another adoption of it.
I believe Jody might remember this.
Sorry.
Around that time, I seem to recall there were several policies that were retired, and I think that was the spearhead of Mr. Fainall. And under the reasoning is that some of the policies were not necessary because they were in the school code. Now, again, I might not be fully correct on that, but I think that's the concept behind why some of these were retired. And again, I don't know if that, what kind of action was taken, and I think I may have been on the board then, but it was 8 years ago. But I think that was kind of the background for that, and I don't know if anybody here would remember that. Except maybe Mr. Simonetta may have been here. I don't know if anybody else would have been here at that time, at least sitting at the table here. But that's kind of what I remember, was
Yeah, I do recall, as an employee here, during Mr. Fainall's time that we did retire some board procedural policies. I don't know whether 009 was one of them or not.
Yeah, I can't imagine that we would retire a policy without a new one.
Right.
About approving policies.
Right. And so the conversation came up when we were having this conversation. It was also in part because of a couple of meetings that I sat in on. And Jonathan can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but in those meetings, they talked about the fact that there is no regulation on how many readings A district can choose to do 1 reading, 2 readings. You can choose to do them only at voting meetings. You have that right to decide how many readings and when you want to do them, but the recommendation is that your policy states what that practice is going to be. So if we're going to say 3 readings and we're going to do them consecutively at standing, regular board and standing, that's what our policy should state. So that's where the conversation came from. It's just those recommendations through various meetings that I've been at and Meg asking the question. I can't speak to 009, but whatever we do with that, whether it's rectify 009 or do 003, we need to state how many and what your process is.
No, Tracy's exactly right. There's no law on policies. It's just best practice to have it in your policy. So that's what started with 003.1. I was able to pull up the minutes, and obviously I'm skimming this very quickly, but it looks like the minutes that were adopted in November 17th, 2015 regular board meeting adopted the minutes from the October 27th, 2015 meeting. And if I'm looking at that, policy item 11.A was the final adoption of policy 009. I don't see anything to suggest that it was retired. So that might have just been a clerical mistake or somehow that happened. So certainly if what the board would then, and what would seem to be appropriate would be for us to look at 009 and ensure that that reflects what we were trying to add at 003.1. And certainly you can do whatever you want, but it likely would not make sense to put these amendments into 003.1 at this point.
So then I think our recommendation is really to pull that one as well, kind of do the combined work that has to happen and bring it back for first reading next, whether it be next week or 2 weeks from now.
But while we're talking about that, so are we still doing 3 readings, and it's not 3 action items, voting meetings, this would be 1 reading without action, and then 2 more on voting, or would it be like the committee meeting, the action meeting, and then the committee meeting?
But we do have to vote on it.
Right,
So
so-
the last one has to be the voting meeting.
Right, so it's gotta be 2 before.
If
the
we
voting.
want 3, do we have to have 3?
You do not have to
I don't
have
know
3.
what, I feel like 3 was news to me. That's why I went and looked.
I don't remember.
I thought it was
being
2. So when Tracy said it has to be 3, I went and looked, and I'm like, well, there's no policy. So that's why I feel like 2 is fine.
We always did first and second reading.
Yeah.
I remember.
Did you vote on the second reading?
Yes.
Yeah, because 3 would be committee,
Right,
skip, committee, vote.
Right.
Whereas if we do 2, we do committee,
right.
vote. That seems to make sense as well, if we're following the law, yeah.
Sorry, so I'm going to say the reason that I realize that sometimes it takes longer, but in certain cases, and I will bring up policy 915, did not give our public the opportunity to come and speak, and that was one of the reasons that I have the issue of shortening it to 2, is we're now cutting out our public in certain instances.
We can always do more. But if there's a policy where it's one of the ones that we annually have to review and approve, or, I mean, heaven forbid, we want to do something over the summer, like the number of meetings that we would need over months, we'd be looking at talking about something over June, July, and August, potentially. It's a long time to have to remember the details of a particular policy. Now, if it's a complicated one, like 915, I think for sure we need the time, but I don't think we should
But if you
hem
put-
ourselves in.
If you put 2 in the policy now, you'd have to then vote to waive policy if you wanted to do 3 for a difficult policy.
So, under policy 009, there are ways to do that, and that's the 2/3 vote of the majority to be able to waive that. And so there are opportunities when you have
To waive
those types of
3, you're
issues.
saying?
Yes.
Okay,
So
I have, obviously, I haven't
Policy
seen 009, 'cause it doesn't
basically
exist
covers
in real
what
life.
we would probably want to be doing as far as our policies and the readings are concerned.
Okay, so Kara, can you unearth
Sure can.
009 and send it out for everyone to review, I guess? It's mysterious. When you find it, maybe there are others
There are a lot.
in that vault too that we're unaware of, that it would be
Yeah,
nice.
just for the board, if you log in under your Board Docs account, there's policies there on the right, there's a little triangle drop down, and when you click that, you get 3 options. You get active, draft, and retired. And retired is where I'm looking right at 009 and a whole bunch of other retired ones that like 4 whatever, there are probably 100 here. So that's there, it's easy to find it. You have to be logged into your Board Docs account to find it. But you can go through there, that's where 009 is. So if board wants to review that and compare and contrast with what, 003.1, or is the consensus to kind of just replace 003 with 009,
Or update 009.
or just update 009? So,
So I think the policy committee can look at that. Kara can kind of pull those together and see what languages needs to be melded together. And then we certainly can do an audit of those that are in the retired to make sure they all truly are retired.
okay.
Oh, sorry, let's go back, because I'm not done. So as far as the school board committees, I am going to very strongly oppose getting rid of safety and security. And I understand the situation of wanting to eliminate some of the time for our board members, our administrators, and employees. However, to me, safety and security was added back when we started doing committees, and I would like to say is that safety and security to me is a completely different issue than buildings and grounds. Buildings and grounds is something where we should be looking at our facilities, making sure we have enough space, making sure that they're running properly. Safety and security is something that there are discussions that should not be held at a buildings and grounds meeting. So being the person that was in charge of that committee, and Susan being along with it, we didn't have to meet very often, but there were items that were discussed that I strongly encourage everyone here to think about of having at buildings and grounds.
I don't necessarily disagree with Jody, but I would only, if you do bring it back to a separate committee, I would suggest that, sorry, Ken, but that the Buildings and Grounds, Director of Buildings and Grounds would be at that security meeting, because a lot of it will affect the buildings if there's going to be any kind of revisions or renovations, if it's had to do with a door or a vestibule or whatever, but other than that, I mean, I think Buildings and Grounds need to be informed before a decision comes to the board, and maybe even finance for that matter, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. And to the other point, the chief of police spending hours at a Buildings and Grounds with very little security, like that usually comes up when it's needed, when there's an issue or something needed. So he's spending his day or at night, at a Buildings and Grounds meeting. It may not be necessary.
I will say from an administrative standpoint, this is not something we feel strongly about one way or the other. We're really trying to be cognizant of your time and the amount of nights that you're out. So if the board, collectively feels strongly on either end of that, we are happy to accommodate. It's really just trying to be considerate of your individual time.
Okay, any other questions or comments on policy discussion for the 2 topics, 2.5, I guess, since we introduced 009 at hand? Anyone from the public wishing to comment? So if I have the summary correct, for the most part, the subcommittee will be kind of pretty much reviewing 0031, I guess, compare and contrast with 009, I guess, in a way. 707 was pulled, that will be discussed at a further time. And for policy 012, I think it's safe to move that on for a vote, because that would be a second reading at the next voting meeting. Unless there's anyone else from the board who suggests edits or anything to that effect. Okay.
So, I'm sorry, but.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Would you looking for a consensus from the board members about that committee structure, or just bring it to vote?
I think a yes vote would mean that we are pulling security out as a separate entity. A no vote would put it back in, a yes vote would have it combined, sorry, I said that backwards. Yes vote would have that combined with Buildings and Grounds. A no vote would have that pulled back out as a separate entity.
Yeah, so that will be on the vote for next week to an A or a nay vote on A as is with the combination, or nay is not to combine the two. So that will be up to the board at the next voting meeting. All right, that concludes policy for this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other business from board members this evening? All right, seeing none, we still have no public. And so that is all. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.